Ladies and gents, welcome back to another Engineers podcast. Today I'm joined by Matteo Carlo, who is head of engineering for payments at a business called Semrush. And Semrush is a really interesting business proposition, marketing platform, all in one marketing platform, and something we haven't seen on the podcast before. So I'm excited to get into understanding the nuances of a marketing platform, but building a global payment system inside of this really interesting business. So we're going to go into that in a lot more details. First, we're going to dive into Matteo's background. Matteo, thanks for coming to join us.
No worries. Thank you for having me, guys. Excited to be here.
Yeah, pleasure. So, in the atypical way, give us a bit of insight into Matteo and some of your background. Intro you.
Yeah, sounds good. I'm Matteo. Originally from Italy. I have a bit of a diverse background in the sense that from academia, I actually studied law, both in the UK and in the Netherlands. But alongside to my studies, I've actually worked for Apple for a number of years as a technician. Finished my law degree, worked for a couple law firms, didn't like it at all, so decided to dive into IT instead. I was lucky enough to start working with Adyen right after university, and I spent about six and something years there. Joined as employee number 300, left around 2,000 employees, so massive growth. Went through an IPO, super cool experience. Learned a lot about payments. Decided that was kind of the industry that I wanted to specialize myself in. Shortly after, went to work for Mollie, another smaller PSP. And more recently, I joined Semrush as the head of engineering of the payment department, helping them build an internal global payment engine, which is something that I've been wanting to do since joining payment, be on the customer side and build from scratch.
Yeah, we were just talking about that offline, and the reasons why SEMrush have decided to do this. We're going to save that for later, because it is really interesting. It honestly is really interesting. I posed that question thinking I might have some of the answers, but it turns out I don't have all of them. Um, let's intro SEMrush and help us understand what they do as a business and why they do it.
Yeah. So SEMrush, it's like the leader in online visibility and content management. To give you a clearer understanding of why SEMrush was founded. But back when it was founded in 2008, it started as a kind of small group of SEO and IT specialists. Right, SEO it's the incipit of our business. And these people were united by the mission of wanting to make um, online visibility and an online competition more fair, more transparent, making it easier for everybody to be able to achieve, for example, the ranking in Google that you want to achieve, or you name it, visibility on social media, and so on and so forth. After I believe now 12 years later, let's say, so around 2020, when Semrush started growing a lot more. They became really the go-to place for any marketeer, whether you are part of a huge organization, whether you are part of a small organization, whether you're a freelancer marketeer, or whether you're even an entrepreneur that is just starting and wants to make sure their website it's ranking well, or that their social media efforts are noticeable, their articles on their website are with the right format for their clients and communicating the right type of content. If you think about it, so let's make it a bit simpler. What does our platform do? If you want to have a website, let's say that you are Dunkin' Donuts and Starbucks is one of your main competitors, and you want to make sure that Dunkin' Donuts ranks higher than Starbucks when you look for cappuccino or when you look for a latte and so on and so forth. We provide the right tools to be able to identify how you rank, why you rank that way, what are things that you can do to rank higher, what are things your competitors doing better than you, and how you can drive more traffic to your website. And this sounds simple, but it's actually quite a complex mechanism that requires a wide number of factors to be able to rank higher. So it's not just about search engine optimization, it's not just about keywords, but of course it's also about content, backlinks, um, advertising, social media management, and for example, more recently, even with the arrival of let's call it the AI hype, there's a lot of AI work that goes into it in a way to build content that is tailored to your customers as easy as with a couple of clicks.
It's a complex world.
It's quite complicated. So for me, it's the first time working on the marketing side. I'm an engineer. I've always worked in payments, or mostly in payments, very much on the engineering side. But I find the idea of marrying the two things quite exciting in the sense that most of the engineers that I work with don't know us, but we are a leader in our own sector, and we have a very strong engineering culture that hopefully is something we can touch upon a bit later.
Yeah, definitely. Talk to us about that marriage then, because a really interesting all in one SaaS platform for, if you like, a different space, marketing. So it's a really interesting business and then a really interesting decision to build your own global payment system. Can you talk to us about the mindset of the business at that point when they took the decision, and then talk to us about your role
Yeah,
inside the business?
of course. Well, first of all, the business was founded in 2008. Back then, let's say that the fintech PSP world wasn't as developed as it is today, so the offering wasn't as compelling. But in general, if you think about, without going into much detail, if you think about how our product offering looks like, it's quite complex in the sense that you can pay per usage, you can pay a subscription model, you can pay for sub users, you can pay for keyword searches, you can pay for articles, you can pay for social media posts. Um, so the first thing to mention is our product offering is very complex. We have more than 50 tools which need to be monetized, sometimes in their own way. Um, and within these 50 tools, there might be different schemes of monetization logic. This makes it quite complex to be able to have a system, let's say from a third party, that is preset with with a set of logic and a set of rules to really tailor itself to the type of monetization needs and product offering that Semrush has. If you think about this, or I mean, probably yourself or anyone listening right now, you have had experience working with third-party vendors, and of course, if you want to have something custom, usually that requires to spurge out quite some money to make something just for you, or likely it requires you to submit a feature request and then gets added to a backlog, which might get prioritized only if there is a high number of customers requesting for the same feature. So likely this means you're not going to get the type of tailored solution that you expect. And in a situation where you have such complex monetization, likely a lot of your logic is going to be tailored. So that is the first and main reason. The second reason is, of course, control over your own revenue, control over your own money flow, control over your own data, and control over the data of your customers. This is two parts, right? The first one is financial, making sure that we can get paid and making sure that we're not dependent on someone else to get paid and to receive the revenue for the organization. but also make sure that our data stays with us and the data of our customers stays with us. So we can have the degree of discretion to make the right decision to protect this data, the data that we own, the data of our customers, whether it's card data, PII, you name it.
I think it's a really interesting move. I think for a lot of people or for a lot of companies, there's that build versus buy argument, and it's obviously you have to weigh up the trade-offs. Why would I do either? Why wouldn't I do either? But I think the idea of building your own payment system is quite a scary thought for some businesses because of the reasons you've just mentioned, the control responsibility factors. A lot is on you as a business. So I think it's a really interesting and smart move, not just about revenue data. It would be really good to try and understand, well, what are some of those engineering challenges that you, the Semrush team, are facing on a daily basis with regards to building your own payment system. Help us understand the engineering point of view.
Yeah, of course. So I would say there are I would say two main factors. The first one being knowledge of the industry and the space. Let's call this more product knowledge, where you need to understand which direction a payment system should move towards. Let's say that right now we operate only in Europe because we are connecting with European providers. And we realize that a big chunk of our customers comes from Southeast Asia, a big chunk of them comes from Latin America, and so on and so forth. It's difficult to decide not only which geography to focus on, but once you enter a new geography, you're dealing with different tax schemes, different currency, different buying habits, different payment methods, different banks, different fraud, right? Certain countries have a much higher level of online fraud than others. Um, so knowing the product and understanding how to move and which direction to move based on your growth ambitions, it's something that is quite complex and generally requires some existing experience in the space to be able to say, okay, if we want to enter India, this is the regulation that we have to deal with. This is the taxes that we have to deal with. This is the fraud caveats that we have to deal with. Payment method. Do they use credit cards? Do they use debit cards? Do they use Android Pay? And so on and so forth. The second part, which is a bit closer to the engineering side, is the caveats of connecting with certain systems that often are quite stiff, quite rigid, and very much legacy-like. There is a lot of buzz around fintech in the last, let's say, half a decade to a decade. How many companies are bringing innovation in the space? But the reality is that a lot of the rails, when you connect to Visa, Mastercard, Amex, when you want to connect to a bank, they are still, let's say, old school. They don't provide for a lot of flexibility. They don't provide for integration with all sorts of development languages. So this complexity from an engineer perspective, to be able to build a connector that's tailored specifically to Visa, one that is tailored specifically to Mastercard, and so on and so forth, can be quite difficult. Of course, other than that, there are a lot more technical challenges. If you want to implement 3DS type of authorization, that's something that requires a whole different setup rather than a standard card billing flow. If you want to build an Apple Pay flow, that requires a completely different service as well. So in practice, you will need to build a small service for each type of integration that you want to have. If you want to be able to get information from the UK tax authorities to be able to properly calculate taxes for your customers. You will then need to build a service that specifically queries the UK tax authorities database to be able to calculate those taxes correctly. So it's going to be a lot of really small components that very often are specific to connecting with one let's call it endpoint, which are not easily replicatable across each system because they're all very different. Some of them are legacy, some of them don't integrate with all development languages, and that this requires quite an attention to detail and quite some dedication in dealing with something that sometimes is not always easy to deal with.
Yeah, okay. I think your appointment makes a lot more sense now. Building a global payment system and even speaking to Adyen on the podcast and other businesses, really having the business logic, the domain understanding is quite critical. Forget the technology stuff for a second. The business logic is really, really important because some of the points that you just made, there's a lot of complexity there. There is a lot of complexity there.
Yeah. Generally, what I would say is engineering, it's quite simple. You can solve engineering with pragmatic approach, but product knowledge, it's really what is going to make you move in the right direction, make the right decision. If a product person comes to the engineering team and tells them to build a system to integrate payments with Scandinavia, maybe that's a really good idea, but maybe that's not only complex, but it's not going to bring that much revenue to the organization. And therefore, you're going to see that you're going to invest a lot of time dealing with a lot of complexity and not really gain much for the business. So a clear understanding of what are your customers' needs, right? This is quite critical, and it's something that is often overlooked by both payments company, but also merchants, companies that are selling payments to their customers, is understanding what is your customers' purchase behavior, where do they come from, what they want to pay with, what type of cycle works for them, do they want to do invoices, wire transfers, uh, how do they want to pay taxes, what currency do they use, because those will always dictate the decisions that are made on the engineering level.
Got you. Yeah, makes total sense. You spent the best part of a decade in fintech, and they've been major players in the industry. Adyen, Mollie, now Semrush, or building a payment system at Semrush. Talk to me about the difference in technology usage between Adyen and Mollie and Semrush.
Yeah, I mean, of course, there's a lot there going on, right? Each company does it a bit their own way, but one that for me kind of stood out in the last few years is, for example, the on-premise versus cloud infrastructure debate. Um, of course, cloud is the more modern approach. It allows for faster scalability. It makes your systems easier to manage. But at the same time, it has a huge impact on cost, and it may also make your regulatory requirements a little bit more complex because you're not dealing on your own infrastructure. Um, Something that, for example, Adyen is famous for is to do everything on-prem and in-house. Um, in my last year at Adyen, actually, I was piloting a more hybrid approach due to some expansion ambitions that we had. We we were trying to get the best of both worlds between leveraging both cloud and on-prem at the same time. It was working well for some projects, but not for all of them, which was quite interesting. At the same time, if I think about, for example, my time in other organizations like Mollie or Semrush, where we are heavily cloud users, what I see it's at the moment that we need to bootstrap, that we need to ramp up really fast. The cloud really allows you to do that because it puts no boundaries to how quickly you can scale up your services. Um, if you think as well at dealing with large data volumes, Again, think about the latest AI trends. Um, those are things that are quite difficult to achieve on premise. You need huge storage, huge computation capabilities. So that's something that cloud will be able to support for you a lot more. There is a trick, right? In the sense that if you decide for your organization that you do want to take the cloud route, what I've been finding to be very beneficial is to build a strong FinOps or financial ops culture, where if you opt for this technology choice, you make sure that it's ingrained in all your team to be financially efficient as well with the way they build their services. So use cloud, you can scale up, you can build big systems, but you have to be very, very careful at where your spend goes in. And generally, um, it's something that companies tend to think about it at a bit of a later stage, especially in seed rounds. You get a lot of money, you buy, you spend, and then you realize that your GCP, your AWS bill are eating out the majority of your money. Um, of course, on the other hand, if you opt for on-prem, the main factor is times frame and the needs to scale your infrastructure, right? It's something that can take up to months versus on cloud, which is something that can take easily days. Another interesting difference that I've noticed in my in almost a decade working in fintech is the choice for tech stack. That's quite a cool little kind of differentiator that it's not super apparent at first. Mostly because, as I was saying before, many card schemes, many issuers support only certain languages. They do not provide connectors for all languages. Of course, this is something that can be overcome, but it introduces an extra layer of complexity that it will be convenient not to deal with. Yeah, mm, something that I would say I've seen was in a place like Adyen, the language of choice was something that was very much in line with what card networks and issuers were providing. Was at Mollie, because it was slightly older organization, it was simply what was the best, the most available language at the time the company was built. Whilst the third approach that we have at Semrush, which is quite unusual, is we have a company with a high engineering degree of high engineering freedom. So we allow departments, but sometimes even to the team level, to choose their own stack. Companies usually have a single stack for the whole organization, whilst at Semrush, we do the opposite. You want to start a new project and you want to onboard a new language, and you can prove that you can do better. You can do it better with this stack. Then you're free to choose the language that you want. Of course, this creates huge headaches for our security and infrastructure teams, because they have to manage all these languages, check for vulnerabilities in a number of places. But it works quite well because we give freedom and accountability together. So again, a stack based on functional needs. For example, Adyen. We need to connect to Visa, MasterCard. What do they use the most? Stack based on best and brightest at the moment of time. Mollie is quite an old company, unlike what people believe. So they picked the stack that was working for them at the time. And lastly, Semrush, where if tomorrow we decide we want to switch our coding languages, our frameworks, we have the freedom to do this based on what we think makes the most sense.
Interesting. I can see how a number of different pros and cons can play out. We'll talk about that. The one thing I do want to go back to, you make a couple of really good points about ingraining a FinOps culture into the business. Now, I want to touch on that, and I want to touch on how you do that. I agree with everything that you've just said. New company, want to ship something to market quickly, not really thinking about what they're spending the here and now. We had someone on the podcast a few weeks back, and they spoke about frugality. They went to join, they joined some major players. They're at Justin TV, acquisition of, they're involved in the acquisition of Twitch by Amazon. So they've seen a lot, especially from an infrastructure point of view. And that was one of his things. Frugality is really key. Um, Sorry, I've waffled a bit, but back to that original point of FinOps and that culture. Help us understand how you ingrain that.
Yeah, so I think frugality. I mean, I think it's a very valid point in the sense that if I generally think of how us engineers look at this, is we are very often distracted by the shiny new toys, the shiny new technology that can do a lot, not thinking too much about is it worth it? Do we need this? For example, I do also some consultancy for startups, and more recently, I was talking with a startup that it's building a payment system in Nigeria, and the founder was kind of asking me some feedback on their infrastructure stack, and he was very much opting for the best, nicest database that he could find on AWS, and the beefiest servers, and so on and so forth, and microservices set up, and you name it. And immediately I told him, but if you look at this, how much it costs you, do you need this for the current volume of transactions that you have? Definitely not. So always start with a simpler, more workable, cheaper solution, a monolithic database, a monolithic application, running something just in a VM, having some basic open source technology that you can install yourself rather than buying it straight up off the shelf from Google or AWS. These are things that in early stage can save or break your organization, because very often we see startups failing because they run out of runway, right? They don't have enough money to keep them going. So keeping an eye on that frugality, keeping it pragmatic, so buying or using what you need rather than what you would like, it's really key. Of course, when your organization scales up, the trick there is to build the possibility of scaling up your application, your infrastructure, as your customer base grows. So if you start from a monolith, make sure that services inside it are not heavily coupled. So if you want to move from monolithic application to a service-oriented application, you can easily do that once you grow your traffic. And then if you want to go to services, from services to microservices, because you're so successful, you're scaling so much, you just need to make sure that you're able to do that decoupling at a later stage, rather than starting already with microservices, which is useless, adds complexity, and adds money. Other than the frugality point, I would say, again, something that we do at Semrush that I find works very well. Whilst in other organizations, I've seen a FinOps team going around and trying to help teams reduce their cost and trying to help them take ownership of their expense, is to simply give freedom all the way to team level. Teams are accountable for their own budgets at Semrush. So they receive a designated amount of money for the year based on how they're running their services, and it's up to them to make sure that they don't run out of that budget. Um, so it's something that it's quite different. In many organizations, budgeting, it's done at organizational level, maybe department level, and so on and so forth. But we do it all the way to the team level. So it's up to the team to make sure that they don't spend that extra money. And they're accountable for it. And at the moment that they start going above a threshold, of course, we always have a little bit of a buffer. It's the moment that we start having conversations about, okay, how do we prioritize lowering your cost versus building new features? And that accountability, it's really the mechanism that I've seen works the most.
Yeah, I think if now you say it, I think if you give that budget to 50 people to manage together in respect of one another, as opposed to one person managing and delegating that, you split some risk up. In fairness, if you put that risk in one basket and one person makes one or two bad decisions, um, that's not a good look. It's not a good look. Okay, smart idea. The technology stack part, I think, is really interesting because I can see the pros and cons for if we just go down the Adyen route here, and they've chosen a really similar stack to Visa, Mastercard, and that makes a lot of sense. But the technology landscape is modernizing rapidly. We've spoken about actually the use of cloud, especially in the payments world where I wouldn't use the phrase it was frowned upon, but I think people were quite nervous for a period of time for obvious security reasons. You can choose to leverage newer technologies and that freedom and autonomy. You can choose to use Adyen's mindset. Help us understand maybe some of the pros and cons of both those arguments.
Yeah, of course. So I would say, I've always been a bit of a security, a bit of an infra guy. So for me, coming at Semrush, working on the product side and seeing all this stack, sometimes makes my skin crawl a little bit. Um, but I would say there are a number of reasons. The first one is that it's not only so apparent, but is recruitment and attracting new talent. Um, if you have a stale, old school technology stack, you will kind of get to a point where it's going to be difficult to hire new resources because people will start to gravitate towards the newer, more modern technologies. So for me, that's always a big factor in when making decisions around technology stack. Uh, 5 years, 10 years from now, will engineers still want to work with this technology or not? What are the trends that we are seeing? How do we adapt ourselves to them? The other one is, of course, a positive side is that you start building a quality level if you are consistent with your stack across your engineering organization, where many of your engineers become subject matter experts in the technology stack that you're using because they have so much exposure to it, they have so much experience with it, they have so much experience with it on a scale which is enterprise scale, which is not something that you see very often. Um, Another thing that I found that I've seen that works quite well is, of course, we talk about trying to be consistent with the technology stack, but technology stacks usually are built for different functions. There's stack that works better for handling big data sets. There is a stack that works better for handling, I don't know, API calls. Uh, you name it. There is a stack that runs better on cloud. There is a stack that runs better on typical on-prem um, uh, infrastructure. There is a database type that works better with accounting and precision. There is a database type that works better with big data models and let's call it more messy data sets, but that allow you to do better connection between these data points. So, whilst a company may choose to build their main service on a given stack, likely internally they will have different type of technologies that are used in specific areas of the organization. For example, for data analysis, for example, for data storage, and so on and so forth. Um, so, in these areas where you're building something that is not core or critical to your organization, of course still important, but it's not the main part of it, you can make the decision of be a little bit more lenient, give a little bit more freedom when it comes to that technology stack. So if you want to build some data applications or a data warehouse, you can actually experiment with different technology types, with different languages. And if you want to build um, some kind of self-service infrastructure set a portal. Let's call it IDP. So if you want to build an IDP, you may want to play around with new technologies, just so that you kind of give a bit of motivation to your engineers, you modernize your stack a little bit, and you try to understand and learn what technology may work best in this setup so that you can replicate it somewhere else across your organization. What I was mentioning before is in my last year of Adyen, I was working on more cloud hybrid tooling, where we're trying to kind of learn about the best of both worlds. This type of experiments, this type of researches are actually what usually stands at the forefront of innovations of technology companies. They all have some, let's call it R&D budget that is used for trying new technologies and experimenting with new ways of doing things that if lead to a breakthrough may heavily change the quality of the product that the company is offering.
Yeah, we haven't really had that mindset on the podcast. Although I'm pretty sure you're all smart. You embody that, but actually sharing that mindset, I think, is quite critical to be able to push businesses forward and do something different to what you've always done, which I think a lot of companies do, and they don't think about actually how can we do this better. And I think what you were describing makes quite a lot of sense between the difference of two stacks. We've spoken about why you would go and build your own payment network. What are the common pitfalls, or what are the things people should be wary of? If they listen to this, they're inspired, they go and do this. I'm sure it won't just be this clip, but if you could advise people, which you do, what are you telling people to be wary of?
Yeah. So when it comes to payments specifically, is other than the usual, which is know your customer, know your business, understand your offering, understand your product direction, and the other point which we touched upon already, which is frugality. Don't overspend. It's kind of try to understand. Um, where do you set a limit for yourself of how much is enough experimentation? If you want to try and build a payment system in a house versus building versus buying it outside of the organization, try to understand whether it's enough to say to yourself, okay, we've tried and now we failed, and it's okay for us to accept this and move on to make sure that we can drive more revenue into the organization. Ultimately, we're here building a business. We're not here necessarily wanting to experiment or play with a payment system. Of course, that's what I like to do. But I'm here to make sure that we can improve the quality of um, monetization offering to our customers and improve the way that the organization reaches its revenue. So at the moment that I see that we become a bottleneck for the organization, it's the moment that I have to say to myself and to the organization, guys, actually we are hindering our revenue. We're not helping. We are hindering our compliance, our control, because the quality of what we build is not good enough. Maybe we don't have enough reliability, so our system keeps breaking and we lose money. So being also humble enough to have that realization of saying, hey, we tried, it didn't work out. Let's buy something externally so that we can make sure to keep the business alive. It's something that it's sometimes difficult to have, especially if you're building something from scratch. There is a tendency of being quite defensive and possessive with technologies that have been built from scratch, um, and being able to recognize the moment of saying this is not working out. It's quite a skill to have. It's quite a you need to have quite an openness towards your own work, embracing of failure, that it's not something that you find often. um, Generally, I would say, can you support all the revenue ambitions of your business? And can you ensure that the accounting machine keeps running. I talk a lot about reliability as the most important feature of a payment system. Reliability basically means is your service, is your system reliable? Can it perform how it's supposed to perform? And in payments, it's quite important to make sure that you're always able to process for yourself or for your customers, because at the moment that you're not processing, you're losing money for yourself. And if you're a PSP, you're also losing money for your customers. So having the right observability to be able to track your reliability, so alerting, monitoring, and so on and so forth, to be able to say, hey guys, we're making money. Hey guys, we're actually losing money to the business. It's the way that you can keep track of that. And at some point, you have to set yourself a target of, are we doing well? Are we not? And if we're not, and we've tried everything that we can to do it well in-house, uh, let's see what else is out there that can improve the situation.
Yeah. Okay. And who knows, if it goes well, you might be able to white label it,
Exactly.
especially with
Yes.
Semrush.
to,
Hey,
to be,
I didn't say it.
to be honest, what we are currently building could be white labeled, but we we are very much tailor made to the monetization that we offer through our product. So it would be white labeled only if we were able to find someone that has such a complex product to the degree that SEMrush does.
No, I bet. I've got one or two ideas. I'll talk to you about it offline. Um, Lastly, ask everyone this. Top three characteristics that you feel a software engineer needs to be able to thrive in today's industry, if you like. What are those top three characteristics?
So one that I see often lacking, um, and something that I've struggled with in the past. For example, at Mollie in the last year, there I was the hiring manager for the infrastructure department. Well, I'm currently hiring for the whole payments department at Semrush, and I find a lot of candidates to be very strong from a hard skills perspective, to be very experienced engineer, but sometimes not to be very resilient or very independent. So to be that person that has that grit, that at the moment your product owner it's not sending you in the right direction, or your manager is not available to review all your work, you can continue pushing the needle by yourself. So independence for me, autonomy has been really a big one. Um, and it's something that seems obvious, but sometimes is not. Um, the other one that I would like to see at least in more senior engineers, it's interest in the product, which can be translated as a customer awareness. Ultimately, even right now, we're building a payment system. We need to understand how our end user, how our end customer relates to it, because this allows us to make much better design decisions when we build a system. Very often engineers have the tendency of just focusing on the task at hand without looking at the big picture of how does this play overall in the way the customer interacts with your system. And what you see is that if you have very high focus type of engineers or organizations, usually they're able to deliver a much higher quality product, which is specific to their customer. And the last thing that I would like to see more in today's type of market, it's flexibility. More often than not, I'm faced with engineers that do not want to adapt their tech stack, do not want to adapt their way of working. Maybe they don't like agile and they just don't want to do it. Maybe they don't like the type of database system we use and they struggle to interact with it. I personally find I have some preferences but I always like to see myself as a stack agnostic kind of guy. I've worked with different approaches. I work with the on-prem, with the cloud. I work with this database technology, that stack, and so on and so forth. And generally, I'm always very, very open and flexible with the type of stack, the way I work, the type of people that I work with, their background, the culture, and so on and so forth. So for me nowadays, to be able to be a good engineer, you need to be a bit chameleontic. You need to be able to adapt yourself based on what you see on the other side. Are your colleagues a little bit different than what you've been working with? Maybe their standards of code quality are a bit different. Maybe they're higher, maybe they're lower. Are you able to adapt yourself and maybe bring your experience to improve their overall quality? Because if you go into a new team and say, hey, your code quality is poor, I can write much, much better code, generally you will be met with some resistance. Whilst if you're able to adapt yourself to their code quality, but then ultimately try to engrave in this team a new code quality culture by showing them the way, let's say, you will be able to achieve much, much more, much higher impact than just going in there with your adamant opinion and kind of try to create some friction with who you have on the other side. So being flexible, being adaptable, I think it's a really good one to have.
Like it. I like all those 3 points. I relate to those. Couple of those are quite frequent answers. Makes a lot of sense. Lastly, plugging Semrush here. You're hiring at the moment in your payments division. Help us understand who you're hiring for, as in hard skills. I think we understand the mindset part. Help us understand the hard skills.
Yeah, of course. So currently, we're hiring for a number of roles. We are quite a big organization with more than 1,000 people. Um, within the payment system, we're looking mostly for Python backend developers. But of course, we open up roles based on our needs. So likely we will be opening some front end roles also later down the year. And across the organization, we're hiring for a number of roles. Again, our technology stack is quite broad, so I'm not going to mention all the languages that we're hiring for. But we hire for Java, we hire for Go, we hire for Kotlin, JavaScript, and so on and so forth. Um, we are a very engineering focused organization. One funny anecdote is we are so engineering focused that we have decided to not have a CTO role because we have identified a CTO role to create an engineering bottleneck where the engineering organization depends on the CTO rather than being empowered to be independent and making these choices. So what we look for are people that are pragmatic, that they can figure out their own work, that they can be independent and autonomous, as I was saying earlier, uh, but also that are willing to push for engineering excellence. We have quite high quality standards. We have quite high coding set standards. And what I'm seeing nowadays, as the market is shifting, sometimes people tend to drop the quality of their hard skills just because they feel that they should focus more on nailing the interview, nailing the conversation rather than nailing the we do, for example, live pairing, code pairing sessions in our interviews. And I was never a big fan of the take it home code challenge or those kind of things, but I'm quite a fan of code pairing interviews and system design interviews, where you really look at how a person thinks around technology. So make sure that you keep your skills sharp as well, not just focus on clearing the conversations.
Good advice. So, a plethora of roles across a number of different backgrounds. We won't go into the CTO part. We'll be here for another 50 minutes because I think that's an interesting move. One I haven't heard before. We've spoken about some organizational change on the podcast, the emergence of the CPTO role.
Yeah. Yeah, I saw
But
her.
the no CTO role, that's an interesting one.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
it's a first one for me as well. So I was also quite surprised during the recruitment phase. Um, but you know, looking at the background, it makes total sense. It was introduced. It was seen as a bottleneck. It was seen as a role that was reducing freedom. So we decided to keep this role open and really give freedom to the engineers.
Love it. Listen, I've loved having you on. Um, it's been insightful. It's been a blast from the past, from our Adyen podcast a couple of years back. The payments world, I've always loved it. So a massive thanks to you, and for people listening to the podcast, likes, shares, subscribes. There's some really interesting snippets here that can be really good, valuable takeaways for people. And thank you, Matteo. Thank you, Semrush, for coming to talk to us, share your story, share your vision, and hope to be chatting soon.
Sounds good. Well, thank you for having me. I mean, thank you, Elliot, and also thanks to Will that is not here today. I'm loving working with you guys. I'm loving your energy, and the guys at Artifacts are hosting some amazing events and meetups around Amsterdam. So if you're ever in the Amsterdam area, I recommend to you to reach out to Artifacts to see if they will invite you to their next event.
Of course, we'll invite you guys. Of course, we will.
Thank you so much
Matteo,
for having
thanks a
me.
lot. Semrush, thanks a lot. And bye for now.
Have a great day.
Hey guys, thanks for watching this episode. Massively appreciate you listening and checking in with us. If you want to find out more about us and what we're doing, please check us out on social media. What we're trying to do at Engineers is build a community to drive knowledge sharing and experiences. On Twitter, we can be found Engineers.io. It's no underscore. We've also got a website which is engineers.io. These links will all be posted in the description. Any feedback and comments are massively appreciated. We're always looking to improve on where we can. Thanks, guys.